Good day, everybody. Again, this is CJ105. My name is William Bauer. I'm the course developer for this class, and we are in week 6, crimes against property. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Crimes against, for this week, we also have 2 assignments. I should talk about those first. Discussion board again. You have to answer 2 questions found in the instructions for the discussion board on or before 11:59 p.m. Central Time on Thursday. You must also have at least 3 quality replies to fellow students or myself on the topics during the week. That's for maximum points. Now, of course, you can have many more than the 3 replies to other students and myself. Some students will have as many as 15 or 20. But you must have at least 3, and they need to be of quality, which means you're adding information or understanding about the actual topics. Okay? The other part of the assignment for week 6 is another essay, again with an APA title page, a body that's 3 to 5 pages long, with APA citations within the body of the paper, and an APA reference page at the end. Again, remember that you can look at the written instructions in the course announcements for help in using Microsoft Office Word to create citations and a reference page. You should also look at the plagiarism area of the course for additional assistance on citations, what an APA title page looks like, how to do reference pages. There are 2 links in the plagiarism area besides an example there. There's 2 links that will lead you to other sample APA papers that'll show you what a title page looks like, what the body of the paper looks like, and so forth. If you have any problems or questions, be sure to contact your instructor on this particular assignment. The assignment is to discuss at least just one, I'll get this right, one crime against property. Look at it and research it from the view of English common law, and then from a specific state statute or statutes. Explain both the elements for both. Remember, elements are the things that the prosecutor will need to prove to get a conviction. Then do a comparison at the end, comparing the common law and the state statute. How have they changed? What have been some of the changes that we've seen? Why did they change? And so on. All right? That'll be our final essay for this particular term. So to talk a little bit about crimes against property. One of the oldest crimes against property is larceny. All right? We've got larceny. Many states still use the term larceny. Some have gone to a term called theft, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. But larceny, under common law, very simple definition. It's the unlawful asportation or taking away a property of another individual without their consent with the intent to permanently deprive them of that property. Okay? Again, unlawful taking or asportation of property of another without their consent with the intent to permanently deprive them of their property. Permanently. Okay? Very key here. Those very specific things. So we're talking about property. You must be able to take it, must be able to move it. And the movement can be any amount whatsoever. That much is enough to make a larceny. Okay? But that means then that the property has to be tangible. It has to be something that can be moved or taken. All right? Now we do have some intangible properties that are represented by things like checks, stock certificates, things like that. Those are technically intangible, but they represent property. The paper is tangible, so it can be taken away, it can be moved, and a person can be permanently deprived of that property. Okay? It's not a temporary. One of the things that we see in some states is they still have on their statutes joyriding. Joyriding is different than auto theft because there's no intent to permanently deprive the owner of the car of their car. joyriders take the car out for a drive until it runs out of gas or whatever, and then they just leave it on the side of the road someplace or in a parking lot. So many states found it difficult to try somebody for auto theft, which is a larceny, because they had no intent to permanently deprive the owner of the car. They were just going out and play with it. So they created joyriding. Auto theft, which is a larceny of a car, is permanently depriving the person of their car. That's their intent. Okay? So you notice in there, the actus reus is the taking of property without consent. The mens rea with intent to permanently deprive the owner of the property. Okay? Concurrence, we don't have to worry too much about causation, although there is a harm, financial harm. But we can get away with just those three. Now, larceny under modern law hasn't changed a whole lot. Larceny under modern law is still defined pretty much the same way. Taking property without consent, permanently deprive the owner. What has changed in modern law is we've created degrees. Okay, we got petty larceny, grand larceny. So we've created degrees based on the value of the property or the type of property. For example, in most states, stealing a weapon, regardless of its value, a firearm, regardless of its value, is always grand larceny. So that's one of the changes that's occurred. Another change has been, and you'll find this in many states, for example, Texas, has developed a statute called theft. Theft is very similar to larceny, but has also included other theft-type crimes, such as embezzlement and fraud. So let's talk about embezzlement and fraud a little bit, because that is part of theft. And if you're researching a state that has a theft statute, it's important to recognize that they've added other crimes into their theft statute, including the larceny. Larceny will still be in there someplace. They also have embezzlement. Now, embezzlement is different than larceny because the actor, the offender, okay, this is without consent. Embezzlement is with consent. Embezzlement, the owner of the property actually hands the property over to the offender. They entrust the property. In law, in legal fields, we call that transferring the title of the property. We hand cash to somebody with the purpose that they're going to go deposit it in the bank, or they're going to buy stock with it. They're going to do something for us with our cash. We've transferred title, essentially, to that person. They get to use that money for our benefit. It becomes embezzlement when the person does not follow through with that intent to benefit us, and they convert the money to their own use. That becomes embezzlement. So under common law, we had larceny, but if the person hands the money to them, they couldn't charge them with larceny. So eventually, started out in about the 1800s when they started having bank notes and things, the courts recognized they had to create something to take care of this problem of property being taken, permanently depriving the owner of property that has been given to the offender for a different purpose. Many people would have people working for them. They'd give them a bank deposit and say, here, go deposit this in the bank. The money would never make it to the bank. It becomes embezzlement. But because it was given to them, the without consent part was missing. We couldn't charge them with larceny, so they created embezzlement. Of course, then we have fraud. This is with consent. In common law, this was referred to as larceny under false pretense or with false pretense. Okay? It's a lie. Somebody lies to the victim to gain the property. Oftentimes we see this fraud involved in cases where like stock frauds or fraud where somebody pays somebody to, for example, repave a driveway. The people take the money, they do a shabby job, they don't do the job right, it becomes fraud. Okay, but again, it's with consent, so it can't fall on, it can't be a larceny. It's not an embezzlement because we didn't give it to them to do something for us. We gave it to them because they lied about what they were going to use the money for. So it becomes fraud. And we see fraud usually in financial crimes, where an individual, the offender, promises to invest somebody's money and get so much percent return, and instead they spend the money for themselves. Ponzi schemes, are frauds. Ponzi scheme, very simply put, and I mean this very simple, is as the offender, I take money from you with the idea that I'm going to invest it and you're going to get a return, say 5%. So I have your money. Then I go to somebody else and I tell them the same thing. They give me money. I use their money to pay you some of that 5%. You're starting to get a return, so you don't get suspicious. But I'm keeping the bulk of the money, and you keep doing it. And soon it's kind of like a pyramid scheme. As long as you got new people coming in to hand money over to the offender can keep pumping money back into the other people, the other investors, so they don't become suspicious. But in the end, they're going to lose money because it's a fraud type of issue. Now, some states will also include crimes like robbery, burglary under their theft statutes, but very few do that. Those are usually separate. But larceny by false pretense is common law fraud. Modern fraud is the same as common law false pretense. Embezzlement hasn't changed a whole lot over the years. It's still pretty much, I give money to somebody, I entrust the money or I entrust property like a car to somebody. They then convert it to their own use. Larceny, other than creating degrees, hasn't changed much. Now, one type of, I guess we can talk about robbery real quick. This is very old. As I said, last week, robbery can be really a crime against persons or a crime against property. We're going to call it crime against property for this class. The robbery is essentially an assault plus a theft. All right? Because this is a face-to-face confrontation. It has to be face-to-face. Larceny is not face-to-face. If they're face-to-face, then it becomes a robbery. Larceny is like taking a bicycle from your front yard when you're not looking, taking your car when you're not looking. Those become larcenies. Robbery, on the other hand, is a face-to-face confrontation. The threat or use of force to obtain property directly from the individual or from their proximity. So if I've got a suitcase, my suitcase is sitting next to me on the ground, and somebody points a gun at me and demands the suitcase and takes it, that's still a robbery. If they point a gun in my face and tell me to give me their wallet, that's a robbery. It's the threat or use of force to obtain property from another with the intent to permanently deprive them of that property. So it is an assault plus a theft. Other than creating degrees and types of robbery, it hasn't changed a whole lot in modern times. Today, we look at robbery, we'll have a subsection of the robbery statute will involve the use of a weapon. Another part will be use without a weapon. There might be a robbery level where somebody's been injured. But the basics of robbery hasn't changed a whole lot. It's still a threat or use of force to take property from an individual, directly from, with intent to permanently deprive them of that property. Okay. Then we have extortion. We're running out of room here. Extortion. All right, extortion is using a threat of some type. For example, maybe a banker cheated on his wife, and the offender finds out about it and threatens to tell the banker's wife about what happened unless the banker gives him some of the money from the bank. That's extortion. Okay, so it's using some type of threat to gain money from somebody. If they're using a threat of force, it becomes a robbery. But extortion is, you do this or else. I'm going to tell. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. So that's an extortion. Against crime against persons and property. Of course, we have, I want to talk about identity theft. Right? Identity theft, many people get it confused with larceny. All right? Identity theft is actually a misnomer. It's a misnomer because when we use the term theft, we're thinking more like larceny. We're taking something, right? We're taking something. But you cannot take an identity. Okay? I can't take your identity away from you and permanently deprive you of it. It's not tangible. It's not something I can hold on to and move. So larceny cannot work in an identity theft case. That's why states had to create identity theft statutes to fill in the void in a modern day electronic world where identity theft has become a major problem. Because larceny won't work. You have to be able to take something and permanently deprive somebody of that property. It's not an embezzlement because I can't hand it to you voluntarily with you going to use it for my purpose. It's not an extortion. It's none of those other things. We had to create a new type of crime called identity theft. It's not the taking of anybody's property. It's not taking of anybody's identity. It is the unlawful use of someone's identifying factors, your name, your date of birth, your social security number. Using that information then to do something else for the benefit of the offender. Maybe they're going to apply for a credit card in your name and then use that credit card. Maybe they're going to get a mortgage on a house in your name so they don't have to do it. They're going to buy a car in your name. There's all kinds of things they can do with your identity that will benefit them. Now, the harm to you then is not so much as you've lost money or property because you haven't lost anything. What you have lost is your credit rating. And you've got people coming after you because they think you owe them money. But you haven't really lost anything tangible, nothing that you can hold on to and say, this is mine. It's identity. And you've never really lost your identity. They're just using it. So now there's two of you out there in the world. Okay? So, and I've worked in some cases like this. It's very difficult to do, and it can happen. It happens usually or oftentimes on computers. This last year in 2012, Target department stores lost something like 40,000 credit card identifiers. Somebody hacked into their system and got them. So when somebody takes your identity and uses it for their own purpose, the only thing that you've lost is a credit rating. Your credit's been injured, and you're having to defend yourself against all these banks and loan companies that want their money because they thought you borrowed the money, but you didn't. But nothing tangible has been gone. So that's why we had to create identity theft as a new statute, a new law, because there was no way to control it otherwise. The old laws just didn't work. So that's identity theft. Let's talk about damaging or destroying property. Two primary ways: arson under common law and criminal mischief. Okay? In the common law, we had criminal mischief and, arson. Arson is defined in common law as the malicious burning of someone else's dwelling. Okay, so it's the malicious burning of the dwelling of another is the way to look at it. Malicious burning of dwelling of another. So the first thing you have to find is what is malicious. Okay, it's much like common law murder. It means malicious means that you are doing it on purpose with intent, purposeful intent. Okay, so that's malicious. The dwelling of another. What is a dwelling? Well, it has to be something where somebody currently lives and they live. It's their permanent residence. So hotels, motels don't count. Commercial places, stores, and those kind of places do not count unless the store owner maintains an apartment in the store or above the store at the same time. Then that becomes the residence, not the store, but the apartment above. That has to be their dwelling, where they live. In common law, this was not viewed so much as a crime against property. They had a different category that we just no longer use anymore. It was called a crime against habitation. A crime against habitation. Where you lived was, under common law, was the most important aspect of this crime. So an offender, somebody wanted to commit arson, could burn a store down, they could burn their own property, they could set fires all over the place, except someone's dwelling, where they lived. Okay, so if they set somebody else's house on fire, it was sufficient. Now, another thing you have to define is what constitutes a burning. Okay, smoke damage is not sufficient. Okay, that's not enough. There actually has to be charring involved. Some part of the building. No, doesn't have to be a large part, but some piece of the structure, the dwelling, had to have charring. That would constitute arson. So as you can see, arson in common law was very limited. Just the dwelling of another person. Charring was required, had to be malicious. That was the extent of common law. Modern laws today, and when you research your statutes, you're going to find maybe multiple statutes for arson. Maybe you're going to find multiple subsections within the statute for arson. But it's going to talk about, of course, burning the dwelling of another. It's also going to talk about burning any structure or any personal property like cars, boats, planes, and so on, or any real property such as open fields, forests. Many states have also changed from malicious to, they'll keep malicious, but they'll also include reckless or gross negligence. So if you're negligent or you're reckless with a fire, maybe you got a campfire and you don't take care of it, and it starts something else on fire, starts a forest on fire, you may still be found guilty of arson because you were reckless and negligent in the use of fire. We've also included explosions that constitute burning. An explosion really is just a really fast fire, super fast fire, and it burns things as well as throwing it all over the place. It burns it. Okay, so that has been included in modern law as well. Criminal mischief, that pretty much damaging in property in general in common law. Maliciously damaging other properties, not using fire, smashing windows, breaking down fences, smashing a door, whatever. You're damaging somebody's property. Today we don't use the term criminal mischief. In most states will have things such as criminal damage to property. They may have specific crimes such as painting on walls, tagging. But there'll be different terms used for various states. In my state that I was a police officer, we had criminal damage to property. That's what we used. and it was divided up by degrees based on how the value of the property that was destroyed. So that's where modern law has gone from criminal mischief. Okay, now let's talk about burglary. Okay, burglary. I'm going to clear this up a little bit. Burglary under common law, folks. Burglary under common law is the breaking and entering, dwelling of another, so it's breaking and entering, dwelling of another, in the nighttime, with intent. With intent to commit another crime within the dwelling, or a theft, which is still another crime. So we got the breaking and entering. Now, breaking and entering didn't necessarily mean that something had to be smashed. What it means is that the boundaries of the residence has been broke through. In other words, you reached through a window. You entered through, you pushed open a closed door. Now, if the door is wide open, we don't have it. But if the door is closed and you push it open, that's sufficient for breaking and entering. So the person would have to somehow gain entrance, enter into the dwelling. It had to be a dwelling of another person. Okay, commercial structures such as stores and factories and so on were not included. There had to be a dwelling. It had to be only in the nighttime. So you have to define what is a nighttime requirement. Nighttime usually is 30 minutes before dark, 30 minutes after sunrise, along those lines. Okay. So it had to be in the night with intent to commit a felony or other type of crime within the structure. Very limited. And as you can probably guess, after talking about arson, this was viewed more as a crime against habitation. Again, just like arson, because we're only including dwellings where somebody lives. So it's a crime against habitation, not so much a crime against property. Now, under modern laws, we shift, like in arson, back to crimes against property because we don't have crimes against habitation. So it's a crime against property. In modern law, it's breaking and entering or unlawful remaining. Okay, most states will have this. They'll have breaking and entering or unlawful remaining, which means that they gain entrance during the time when they were allowed to, and they hid or they did something so they weren't detected, and they remained unlawfully in the structure to commit their crime. Remaining in a structure doesn't have to be a dwelling anymore. It could be a store, it could be a school, it could be a government building, it could be almost anywhere. In fact, most states will have subsections for burglarizing a car or any any type of vehicle, including cars, boats, planes, so on. You can burglarize those by breaking and entering, unlawful remaining. Unlawful remaining really comes into play with stores. Somebody enters a store, maybe they hide in a bathroom or in a storage room or something. The store closes, the person comes out, steals a bunch of property, and then breaks out. Okay? Under common law, they would not have committed burglary. It would just be a simple larceny. But under modern laws, now they entered during daylight time. Okay, you might note nighttime is gone for most states. In the states that still have a burglary statute that has nighttime in it, will have another statute or another subsection someplace that refers to any structure, any time of day, and doesn't necessarily have to be breaking and entering. And the rest of it is still the same, with intent to commit a theft or other type of crime once they have entered or unlawfully remain in the structure. So many changes. Breaking and entering is not totally required anymore. Dwelling is gone. It could be any structure. Nighttime is completely gone. The intent, though, is still the same at the end. The intent to steal, the intent to commit another crime. Okay? So now we've gone through burglary. Those are the primary ones that we're dealing with for property crimes. All right? I'm trying to think of any others that we have to deal with. I don't think there are. Trespass, of course. Trespass is unlawfully gaining entries to someone's property. Most states today, for there to be trespassing charge, which is normally a misdemeanor or petty misdemeanor, there would have to be a locked gate, there'd have to be a locked door, there'd have to be signs posted on the property notifying somebody that they'd be trespassing if they get on the property. So that's trespass. Now we have, quickly we're going to talk about, or briefly we're going to talk about crimes against public order and crimes against morality. All right, just very briefly. Quality of life crimes, if you will. All right, this is very simple. Public order crimes, disorderly conduct. Disturbing the peace. Okay? These are the primary ones we talk about. Disorderly conduct, disturbing the peace. Some states have combined these into one law because they are so similar. Disturbing the peace means that you have disturbed some specific person or some small group or group of people's peace. Maybe it's loud noise, and so on. Disorderly conduct is very similar. Some states will define disorderly conduct as being disorderly, such as yelling, cussing and swearing, urinating in public. These kind of things become disorderly, where disturbing the peace is simply too much noise. That's the biggest thing. Okay, so these are public order crimes. If somebody's begging, that can become a public order crime because it's disrupting the flow of the public. Okay, blocking a sidewalk is a disorderly conduct, may have a statute all by itself. So these are the types of crimes we have in that area. Now, I want to just briefly talk about some of the quality of life crimes. Things such as drugs, prostitution, gambling, okay? When we're looking at quality of life crimes, we're looking at very minor crimes. These are actually very minor. There's no victims. These are also called victimless crimes because there's no true victim. We look at these as crimes that deal with adults that are consensually committing the acts together. In other words, for example, if your state has a law against prostitution, both the prostitute and the John or Jane, because we do have male prostitutes today, are charged. They both get charged. There's no innocent victim involved in these type of crimes. Same with gambling. You have a group of people gambling, all of them are charged. There's no innocent party involved. There's no innocent victim. No one's injured because they're doing this on their own. All right? Drug sales is a victimless crime because the person who's buying the drugs wants to buy the drugs. So the drug dealer isn't really harming anybody unless they sell to a minor. But if they're just selling to an adult user, they haven't harmed anybody. It's other crimes that may be associated with some of these people because of their antisocial behavior that is harmful. But the drug selling, drug use, in of themselves harms no one but the person involved. But these become quality of life crimes, along with other types, damaging property, some of the civil infractions such as having an abandoned house that's falling apart. It falls under what we refer to as the broken windows theory of crime. If you're in a community where houses are allowed to fall apart, nobody's living in them, trash is allowed to build up, these minor crimes are happening. You got somebody on one street corner selling drugs, a prostitute on another street corner selling him or herself, someone else that's taking numbers for gambling. It lowers the quality of life within that particular community. People take less pride in their community. They also become fearful in their community, and they won't go out. They won't go out and walk around the block. They won't go down to the park, and so they stay in. So the honest people are inside their homes, and the criminals are outside the homes, and we've lost control. Now, if we start trying to do something to reduce these within the community itself, or on the streets of the community, in some fashion, whether it be to arrest them all or to create regulations where they, like the prostitutes have to be in a brothel in the commercial side of town instead of the residential side of town. Whatever we do is to reduce these smaller acts that take away the value of the neighborhood. And then people start going out. They start going out and seeing their neighborhood. They walk around. They go to the park. As soon as you have witnesses in a neighborhood, honest witnesses, people who are watching what criminals are doing, the criminals go away. It's awful hard to burglarize a home or a store or to commit an armed robbery when there's a bunch of honest people walking around that can testify against you. So that becomes a problem. That's a quality of life issue, and we find many law enforcement agencies going to community-oriented policing, also known as community policing, philosophies where they include people in the neighborhood and identifying problems, identifying solutions to those problems. And some of those problems aren't always criminal. Some of it may be, gee, we got 2 houses on our block that are, the windows are all broke out, they're abandoned, they're falling apart, and they're being used by gangs, they're being used by drug dealers, whatever. The police then can contact the city officials who are involved in taking code enforcement, have the house removed. That reduces the problems in the community without having to make any arrests. So when we talk about quality of life crimes, we're talking about also the broken windows theory. We're talking about reducing the negative effects of some acts so that we can gain positive reinforced actions from the general public. So we've gone through crimes against property. Be sure to contact your instructor if you have any questions, any problems. And next week we'll talk about crimes against the state, which essentially is crimes against government. Won't take very long. Be sure to if you can work on your essay, get it turned in by Sunday night. If you need an extension, contact your instructor and ask for an extension. Also, be sure that you have if you have not already gotten your proctor form submitted, get it done this week. Friday of week 6 is the cutoff for getting your proctor forms in. You need to have a proctor who will then administer the final exam to you. You must take the final exam to pass the course. That's Park University policy. So you have to have someone who meets the requirements of Park. There's a policy in place. You can find it in the Park website. If you're within a 1-hour drive of a Park University site office, you need to use the proctors there. If you live outside of that area, then you need to use someone who qualifies under the policy. Public librarian. If you're in the military overseas, you'll be looking at probably your education officer in your unit. College professors, and so on. But there's a policy in place. If you need to have a non-park university proctor, you need to make sure they meet the policy, fill out the form, get it submitted. The final exams then are sent automatically by the university. The professors, instructors, load the finals into the system. They are automatically sent to the proctors once they have been approved. Okay? So when you do the proctor form, I caution you to be sure that you have the name of the proctor correct, you have their email correct particularly. If the email is wrong, they'll never get noticed. They'll never get the final exam. I've had problems with that in the past. So be sure that you've got the right email, you've got their phone number listed on the form so that they can be contacted if there's a problem, and be prepared to take your final exam. You will find a practice exam in, I believe it's week 6, week 7. You'll find, next week you'll find some topics to research to be sure that you'll remember what they are, such as what is common law burglary? What is modern burglary? What's the difference? What's larceny? What's identity theft? What's the difference? What's arson? Common law and modern law, and so on. You need to be able to explain these. You need to be able to see a scenario and understand what crimes have occurred. Okay? So, for example, if during a robbery, the little old lady we talked about before keels over and dies, remember, robbery is one of the listed felonies. We have the but-for, proximate cause, will probably be met if she's in the store. We've got a felony murder, first-degree murder. Okay? Remember all these. All right? So with that, we'll end this particular lecture. Have a great week.